Welcome to Decoding Growth, where unfiltered conversations and bold ideas are reshaping retirement. Each episode cuts through the noise to reveal the strategies and unexpected alliances driving real industry change, one conversation at a time. Here are your hosts, Lisa Kottler and Will Prest.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Decoding Growth, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on what really drives innovation in wealth and RetireTech. I'm Will Prest.
And I'm Lisa Kottler, and we are thrilled to have an absolute powerhouse today. She's an entrepreneur, an investor, board director, cancer survivor, and currently president of the Founders Arena, Pam Cytron.
Good morning. How's everyone?
We're great, and we're so happy to have you. I think what's fun is the diversity of your background and your experience. You've built and curated an accelerator and a cohort. I don't know, what would you call it? A business, a group. You've written term sheets with some of the biggest banks and organizations. You've talked about with us in previous times, different sales cycles and all these different ways to get to business. And you've really shaped how startups and incumbents partner with each other in the wealth tech and RetireTech world. And you're not afraid to call out what's working and make new stuff happen. We'd love to hear a little bit about that.
I've been called a pit bull with manners before.
I like that. What's that mean?
Sounds about appropriate now that I know you a little bit.
One of my she's retired now, but it was one of my old clients. And she introduced me once as Pam's great, but she's a pit bull with manners sometimes, right? So I thought, all right, I can live with that.
So let's dive right into that. You've started this group called the Founders Arena. You've been doing a number of different things. You're really helping new ventures get to market. Can you talk about why you're doing it, the why behind it, and what you're learning and what you hope to achieve?
The why, I'll tell us a little story around the why, but having been a founder successfully and unsuccessfully, and being a little bit more mature than some of the early founders that we're seeing, the process of what I went through, I made mistakes on cap tables and things like that. But the ability to survive through some of the unintended consequences of some of the investor challenges was because I always was making money. And honestly, I never did an accelerator ever. In fact, I found them to be a waste of time. So when we started the Founders Arena, it was like you had to call it something. And with innovation, sometimes when we find a new category, we tend to jump in without comparing it to something else. So while we are an accelerator in the sense of our ability to accelerate growth, I really wanted to create the community that was connecting the new companies that had gotten some success, right? It's not taking them out of the box. It's not ideation stage. It's that they got out there. They got that first client. But sometimes when a founder gets that first customer, all they are from a client service perspective is laser focused on that client. But that's the best time to accelerate your pipeline. Because you've got that client, right? You've de-risked yourself in a certain way because somebody went first. And somebody going first on a new platform is it, and how that person goes. But how you accelerate the second, the third, and the fourth, where you don't suffer a gap of months or years. And I was coaching a lot of startups, and I was never doing it for money or a fruit basket, nothing like that, right? I like to help people. And it's not all the things I've done so well. I mean, I got a ratchet past. I could be a Netflix series, okay, from all the way up to here. But it was the ability to take those lessons and the pain. And so one of the things that I did, we all did weird things during COVID. I journaled all of my different areas of success, from how I started in sales and the details of that and the startup, just to look at lessons learned. Yeah. And so what you find is you get product buyers, product makers, And I use this term in our term, influencer. Okay. I don't mean influencer that we're TikToking all day. The influencers around our industry, those thought leaders. Okay.
Mm.
But the challenge with some of that is, guys, and I think you know this, is that some of the people we perceive as influencers, they're legacy influencers in our business. Okay.
Yeah.
So that ability for these startups to get in and understand it. And in RetireTech and in wealth management specifically, right? And I'll back up for a second because it's the vertical in the vertical. Okay. So we have fintech, and then within fintech, we've got wealth tech, and then you could put RetireTech in that, right? And so with AI, how are we getting down to the lowest common denominator? But what I discovered in wealth management was that, listen, I've been dealing with legacy my whole life, as you guys have, right? Legacy systems are everywhere. But the legacy infrastructure around wealth management is a little bit different because of the different sizes of our stakeholders. There's little IRAs, there's big IRAs, there's Morgan Stanley's, there's big companies, small companies, right? There's all of that. But interestingly enough, that back office hold of those vendors that have been around, putting the glue together, right? From an innovation perspective, we have more of a market that wants to connect. I want you through that dashboard. I want you through that. And so it's made it incredibly challenging on the scaling side when you've got a lot of wealth management products that are looking at B2C. Okay. Because they can't scale. And our investment in the B2Cs, they need a lot more money, period. Not questionable, period. And fintech investors tend to look at these tranches in this. We're not going out like a marketplace and saying we need $50 million to get clients. They want you to spend your own money. They want you to risk your life and your wherewithal and get some money in, right? And then they might give you $5 million, right? So what we see a lot of is some of these B2C products are coming and they got to go B2B, B2B2C. And what that does is it takes some of that innovation out of the picture, because you're still plugging into the legacy. You're still doing that. So anyway, if we looked at what we built, it was, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were,
one second. Basically, we built that ability to put those buyers and those sellers and those influencers together, but by vetting them with the ability to say, listen, they've got customers, they've got revenue, they've got this, they've got that. They don't have this, and enabling them to wear the things that they don't have as pride, not shame.
Exactly. And so Will and I have, one of the things that we are really trying to do with the work that we've done, including, and also with this podcast, is how do we, in the RetireTech world, create an orchestrated ecosystem? How do we published our map about 6-7 months ago. It has 60 companies on it. Our next version in a few months will have probably 50% more than that. And how did they start to work with those legacy firms, to your point, and then also collaborate and integrate with one another? So we're doing what we can to try to bring those worlds together. But you made so many great points in your last comments. But one I want to tease out a little bit. These enterprise firms, these legacy firms, look, they have a lot at risk. There's a lot at stake for them. We know that. But so how can they develop a greater risk appetite as they look at these RetireTechs? Because I would say that their inaction is probably the greatest risk, right? Then they're failing to adapt to tomorrow's market. So for those folks in our industry that are senior executives at these legacy firms, what advice would you give them? How would you talk to them in terms of how they go out and evaluate these companies and if or they should bring them in?
I speak to it from a couple points. One is speed. Okay. The speed by which they take them through the process. I have one of the cohorts did a big an incredible partnership, right? And that ability to keep it moving, that ability to see it. But instead of sitting there, spending all your time figuring out how it's going to support your businesses. And I want to be careful not to call out anybody, because We all know they are. I don't want to call anybody out because it's not a negative on any of them. But the problem is they spend too much time figuring out what their product teams are missing instead of communicating with their customers.
Yes.
Okay. So the end customer, whether it's trust in a state or whether it's this, right? So they spend all their time saying, how do we integrate this? We need this new functionality because our clients are asking for it. Okay. That's great. But instead of engaging some of their customers in that process, they go silently. They go look at these companies. They try to integrate it all in. So it's a white label powered by all this stuff. And in a lot of cases, guys, it never gets to the customer. Okay. And then it delays itself for 2 years. So I think that if we think outside the box, if we look at what we're doing, how do some of these legacy players who, as I said earlier, have a much bigger hold on the industry for adding new products and new functionality to say, figure out this partnership in a different way? Okay. The partnership is, why don't you let the startup sell themselves? Okay. Because the other thing legacy companies aren't really good at is selling new shiny objects. Okay. And let that happen. Let's see what happens. Do that part of your thing. Make a small investment, right? It doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar investment. It doesn't have to be an investment at all, right? Make them a commitment of cash, right? And one of the things I do tell founders is, if you're going to make a deal with an enterprise firm and they're going to tell you that they're going to sell for you, then give them a quota. And if they don't make the quota, they pay you the difference of that money at the end of the year.
Yep. They have to have skin in the game, motivated and incentivized.
But the skin in the game's got to be rotated, right? They basically want to starve the startup. They want the startup to prove themselves. They want the startup to do all of this. Okay. Do you know how many companies have gone out of business while they've been waiting to write a contract with one of the big banks?
Yes.
Like millions.
Yeah.
And you have to have the transparency, but it holds true on the founder side too. Okay. You have to make sure that you are transparent. And I think too many founders try to hide their financials, try to hide all of this, whereas you should wear that with pride, not shame.
You're hitting on a super interesting point that first of all, I think the three of us, our collective experience has seen, but then our work with the new ventures and how it connects into these incumbents and enterprises is, we've seen the reason, and we're building basically a enterprise playbook. And you're talking about the components of the enterprise playbook. So one of the ways that we've done models is the new venture and the enterprise have identified that they want to work together. And one of the ways to do it that de-risks it, I want you to talk about de-risking and other strategies, is if you can set up a pilot for X number of months with a sales quota, it's not just a nice idea at lunch, but you're going to get in front of these intermediaries at these kinds of institutional clients. Let's just set up a pilot fee, because otherwise what happens is the new venture can't afford to do it. And the 9 or 11 or 45 people that they have, it just takes them over the edge and it runs them out of business.
Yeah. One thing that you said, and you used a word I like, when we get startups, they talk about trial, they talk about POCs, all of this. And I believe that it should be like a trial license. Okay. And why I say that in those schemes is because when someone's doing what I've learned, big companies, small companies, when an institution thinks they're doing a POC, they think they're supposed to figure out how to break the system. When they talk about doing I like the word limited license, right? Trial can work, but it's still, trial sounds temporary. Trial sounds like there's an out. Okay. And the thing is, it takes so much time to onboard. It takes so much time for procurement, right? So I think that am I going to make it through procurement, period? And that has to happen first. Because if you're not going to make it through procurement, what does that do? But when you use the word limited license, all of a sudden the behavior changes and they're thinking about how it's supposed to work for good.
I also like that because I've been involved in a lot of pilots, both inside big enterprises, because I started there for the first 15 years. And then as an advisor, Lisa and I are working with others. And there's also a huge desire for the large company to make it work. but ignore the lessons that they're learning. Works for the pilot, POC, but then it has a very hard time getting legs outside of that. And I think you have to understand where it is working and where it isn't working. Like a great athlete, what's my competitive edge? What did I learn from that instance? What did I learn from that particular client or that distributor? And then let's be better next time.
Yeah.
I love the analogy of the athlete, because that's why I called it the founders arena, because it's an arena, right? And if you really look at it, founders are the ultimate athlete, right?
Yes.
Because it's stamina, it's perseverance, it's tenacity, it's strength. It's everything that an attribute that an athlete has, right? That we do it. And so even how the founders get their relaxation and exercise and making sure they're doing these things, because you need more energy and stamina. It's not a game of 2 hours of basketball. It's not a football game. It's not a soccer match. You got to go at that speed on the field every day, all day long.
Right.
Super interesting. I come from a sports family. I played college sports. And one of my best coaches used to say, champions are the ones that can take the most pain and are willing to be the most honest. They'll just continue to work. And people always talk about whose works harder, but imagine how much pain. And like you said, they're putting their life on the line. They're putting their family's finances on the line. You have to be crazy to be a founder.
You do. And to be the founder's spouse. I'm married to a founder. It is a full family affair. Everyone has to be on board, but I couldn't agree more that the grit and tenacity and the ability to handle the pain and walk through it and keep going is critical if you're going to be a successful founder or just a
we could do a podcast with your other half and my other half, right? And then you got to bring my kids up. And then you got to bring my kids on. Because if you listen to them as this, even in their things, they've lived in an entrepreneur environment their whole life.
Wow.
Okay. They don't know any different. They've lived in a house with 20 people. We used to have people in the house. We wouldn't even know who was there. There was 20 of us were working in my house. Somebody could have come on and robbed us blind because kids never knew who was in the house. But the employees became part of the household in some cases. So I like that analogy there, Lisa. It is the other part of it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I was saying along those lines, when we talk about what it's like to actually build a company, and we know that and you've already alluded to this, there are stages to it, right? You have a hypothesis, you go talk to potential customers, you learn from them, you build the solution that you think is going to solve that problem and that they're willing to pay for. But then you have to go out, and we've talked about a proof of concept or a pilot or however you want to talk about it, but getting that early traction, you mentioned earlier, getting that first yes, it takes a lot to get there. Going from 0 to 1 is arguably the hardest part of a venture. And then there's various stages beyond that. You try to go from 1 to 10 to 100 to 1,000, et cetera. So, Pam, when the enterprise firms look at these potential strategic partners in these RetireTechs, I feel like they often look at it through the lens of how they would evaluate an already built strong company. They look at a company, instead of 0 to 1, they're looking at it through the lens of a 1 to N company, which is a very different prospect. So how do we get these legacy firms to view the startups, these early ventures, for what they are, and understanding the various stages, and that if you're going to come in at a certain stage to partner with them, you can't expect them to already have all the bells and whistles, that maybe now you can co-collaborate. That's not right. Co-design rather, or collaborate to build out future products, but they seem reluctant to want to do that. So we want to try to educate them on looking at the various stages and how to evaluate it, but it's a tough prospect. So you have a lot of experience in that. So what are your thoughts?
Listen, what I think happens is that some of these enterprise companies, you can get their attention, right? And they want to try new things and they want to go through it. But what happens is, even if you get them on the straight and narrow for a couple of years where they're looking at a corporate venture fund or what we're doing, right? The thing I love corporate venture money. I do, because I think that it's quite strategic. But problem is that the corporate venture line in corporation, one of our bigger, fintechs, is not aligned to the product side. So they create their own conflict already. Okay, so you've got the VC guy and he's bringing in deals, but the product people over here are saying, well, I'm sourcing my own deals. So there's got to be a level up. And I've always believed, and I don't care if it's a big bank, insurance company, it doesn't matter, right? Until innovation reports basically into the board. Okay, innovation should not report to technology, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there's many conflicts with that organization, right? So when new product stuff is, you can fix the process a little bit, but until they actually get a mindset in the organization that this is what it is, right? So you can get this great little product and they're talking to this part of the company or that part of the company, right? But let's not forget that most of our biggest enterprise vendors that we're talking about, they were a startup. They forgot where they came from. And they've built with acquisition. They haven't built scaling revenue on a product. Think about all kinds of products that we know. Single brand of a single brand of this, right? We have not built a unicorn in our business outside of building it through acquisition. Okay. So to answer your question, because I think I digressed a bit, they've got to be able to look at it. But I think what they need to look at is maybe it's a new line of business that becomes the co-sales area, right? Let them try to sell that startup into their client base, right? Before they start all the integration. Because most of these platforms you can use, okay? Every startup doesn't want to have to go to vendor number 1, vendor number 2, vendor number 3, and have to create a partnership so they sit in their little UI, right? So that's the ability to say, how can they look at that? But I also think that sometimes we overlook the tier 2 big vendors or the other ones. And that's also where they have to connect with their ideal customer profile, because the best person to influence you with a partner is the partner's existing customer.
Great.
So I could call up one of them and say, hey, go meet this founder. But if I give it to one of the clients, right, and say they love it, I'm like, you go tell your company that you really like this. See, I think there's a way that we work both sides of that a little bit.
I think there's a way to earn your way in too, because I've found that when trying to bring these two parties together, you have a fantastic lunch meeting. You have a couple other meetings where people think this is the greatest idea in the world. And then you meet, and then you have to get to working with their enterprise clients, because this innovation is going to help them build their business. But there's all kinds of barriers and friction. National sales is like, well, we thought this was a great idea, but this company working on something there, and it's like never a great time. So I think it comes back to two things, and I want you to comment. One is the mindset, and 2 is the risk. Sometimes it's personal career risk or it's financial risk, but there's a lot of risks that are hard when you're in a big company. And do you really want to take them? And that's what the new ventures are asking them to do. And one of the things that I just really admire about you, Pam, is you are fantastic about thinking about risk. Yeah. You've taken risk, as you started the podcast with. It's not always worked out, but you've learned from risk. What kind of coaching ideas do you have for both kinds of parties?
So when they look at these things, I think we need to be able to find a way in the bigger institutions that they get incentivized for failure as much as they get incentivized for success.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about the bottom line. Okay. I understand profitability. Like I've done that, been there. Okay. However, something has to change. Right. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you, if something doesn't change quick with all of this AI, we will not see the forest through the trees. Okay. Right. Because what's real, what's not, what's about. I got a pitch the other day from a 14-year-old. No kidding. I got on the Zoom and here's this child, and he couldn't come visit me because he doesn't drive. Okay. And he had a modeling system. He had a modeling system for banks and stuff. Anyway, I was blown away. And I got referred to this guy by somebody like us. He said, hey, would you talk to this founder? And I got on the call, and he's younger than my children. Okay.
And he can't drive to the meeting.
I love it.
And he can't drive to the meeting. But the point is that I was very fortunate in one of my startups. I had a sponsor in one of the world's largest banks who was unlike any person I ever met on the Wall Street. And he got things done. I got start to finish through an enterprise contract with this huge bank in less than 90 days. And I've done that many times. And it wasn't a multi-month sales cycle because I was very clear with them. I said, I don't have any money. I can't drag this process out. If you like what I got, you got to buy it. You got to pay me a lot of money. But he's the anomaly. Okay. But they're deep in there, and they're there when you find them. But if you change some of the way these enterprises look at innovation, who runs innovation, where it's done, but enabling yourself to reward for failure and risk in a creative way around innovation, I think that would help. And also being more patient and understanding and not making your timeline so rigid. Because in some cases you can excel those schedules, and sometimes, but the problem is that when they go to implement, they implement these big things, and it doesn't have to take that long. So it's speed, right? And all of those things that big companies aren't good about. On the side of the founder, which I think is much more important, okay, because we've been pushing that other one uphill for a long time. They have to own that process. They have to de-risk themselves. And I mean by founders de-risking themselves, okay, is, what my traction is, what my market is, asking them, listen, I need to understand what kind of product I'm going to be in your organization, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, where that is, because that makes an impact on what they have to do to go through procurement, right? And whether or not they sell the most senior person of the institution, if they can't get through the procurement rules, it doesn't matter. That procurement person owns the power.
Yeah.
So I always tell founders, get your procurement person, befriend them early in the process, and make sure that if you spend one more hour with this firm, vendor risk is not going to be your issue. Okay. You may or may not win, but close that up. Close the things that once you sell them become the bottleneck. And so what happens if you reverse it, if you think about it, you sell a client, everybody buys in and they say, yes, we're going to buy this and this, right? And then they send you over to procurement. Okay.
Right.
And there's no sense of urgency. There's no sense of rush. There is no reason it needs to take 6 months to do a contract. It could take a day, right? So get that out of the way, because what happens is that you do that and then months pass, and sometimes you're on ice with your product until that's done, because they gave you this temporary license. So that's what I'm saying. Get that license up front. Put an exit clause. Say, this doesn't work. You're in 90 days, whatever. Get the fact at the very beginning that you have papered yourself up and you know that you are in a position to do business with that firm. And if you can do that, basically you're not going to get to spending time, money that they don't have, resources that they don't have on something that could go either way. In this case, it could still go either way, depending what they are. But if someone made all those commitments, the chances of success at the end are much greater. But founders are afraid to do that.
It's the best advice for founders is to de-risk all those things you can. And that is one of the most critical things. There's such a focus on product, and I'm building this cool, shiny toy, this cool solution, but de-risking is everything. And you have to go through that process. But I want to shift gears a little bit, because let's say that, because here's something that Will and I have seen, and I know you have too. I think we've talked about it, but one of the trends, so we published our map and then we published a report on the map, which really talked about the 12 trends that we observed as we were out creating the map and finding all the innovation that's happening in our industry. One of those trends is that using distribution as a competitive advantage, because we all know distribution trumps product. And yet most of the focus is always on the product and what the solution is. But if you don't and we've talked to most of these RetireTechs, and they all want distribution. That's what they all need. That's what the legacy firms have. But again, there's this bit of mismatch sometimes in trying to bring those two worlds together. Do you have any examples maybe where where the product was just okay, but they really had the right distribution channels and it made all the difference? Or maybe even the reverse, where there was a great product, but it fizzled because they really didn't have the distribution that they needed?
Yes. And I will also tell you one thing on that enterprise, a little bit of a misnomer sometimes, or a false sense positive. Some of these legacy clients, while they have a lot of them, many of them have lost touch with them. Okay. So if you think about the bigger the company and someone's been on your platform for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
You sometimes lose touch of who the check writer is, who the thing is. And so what I find is that there is this perception that if I do business with one of these guys, I'm going to immediately get access to their 500, 600, 700 clients.
Right.
And that doesn't happen because of the things actually, Lisa, you said, is that the salespeople get guarded. I don't want you in my account. I don't want that. But at the same time, they also may not do that. So I think some of it's more like a concierge that we need to look at, right? You go to San Francisco, there's 1 million Chinese restaurants. Okay. The concierge that you go to is going to send you to 1 or 2. Are those the best in town? He's going to tell you they're the best in town. But those are the people that have been selling to him.
Right.
Okay. Those are the people that have been convincing him that my product is good. This is there. So I think we need to we don't always have to, our industry from a sales perspective, from all that, is so rigid. And we accept that it's okay to take 18 months to close a deal. That's not acceptable. That's not scalable, right? But we accept that. So I think when we look at these things, when you've gone in and you've done distribution, and I want to be very careful not to call anybody out by names, but what I've seen in some of the bigger wealth techs is that they'll buy a company, they think the fit is there, they didn't do the proper fit with their client, then they go to implement it, then it takes longer. And for all those reasons, having nothing to do with the product market fit of what the customer actually needs, you know what, we're going to do away with this. So I know founder in there, 2 years they're working on it. 2 years, year end comes, they look at their back. We're not going to do this anymore. Okay. Now that founder doesn't have anything. That founder's got a job at a legacy company, which he probably hates. Okay. And he's doing that. But more importantly, it was good enough 2 years before that to get into the client. There was enough good feedback. It was the execution of getting that product to market. Yeah. So we lost the product. You lost the founder. You lost the whole concept because of that execution in there. Is a firm like yours, a nonprofit like ours, right, that serves as that concierge that's really screening them, because everybody wants them to get it. And we also, all of us need to be, it's great to have a map of all of these companies, but it's our job to make sure they're legitimate. It's our job to make sure, right? I love all these young people. They got to be able to look at where the legacy is valuable. And our legacy of being in this industry for a long time, our legacy for building, it's our job now to pass around that knowledge and leave what we have a better place than we came to.
Right. And I think I love that concept. It comes back to we really see this playbook where an enterprise wants innovation. They want to continue to move forward. They want to improve their competitive advantage. And the new venture can fulfill that. But you need this kind of Google Translate, this concierge in between to help the two parties connect and see that even though it seems like when they're sitting at the table, they have the same goal, they come from completely different places. Yes. They work at different speeds, all of these things they talked about. And I think that's what is really exciting for Lisa and myself, and why it's great talking to you, because you personify it, but we've both worked in big brands. We understand the product and the sales and the distribution and these time cycles, and being within the confines of the big brand, which has so many advantages. And then we both went to startups, which is how this whole idea and how this consulting practice and how the map even came to being, which was no one's really talking about innovation and startups. No one's put an organization around these different neighborhoods. And yet we were both in startups and we're both in these big brands. I don't know if you have more to say there, but I really think that's one of the way, and maybe where you take it is, one of the things you've talked about with us offline here is the importance of community. And maybe that's part of this connection. Can you talk about how you're thinking about the importance of community and bringing these multiple parties together?
I think it comes from twofold, right? It's building the people that are interested, like you guys, right? In seeing whatever we could, this foundation, right? Because when I started selling 40 years ago, enterprise software, okay, I was doing 50 deals a year, making bank. Okay.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And we'll talk about it at another time, but I documented, I believe in our time that all of us have lived through 6 formidable sales cycles. Okay. And we're in the 7th. And the challenge is with this 7th sales cycle is think about the new people coming into our industry. They're young. They grew up in a different world. They grew up with instantaneous. They grew up with things being fast, right? But yet still the foothold on our industry is coming from a lot of us that have been here for a long time, right? And those people that have been here for a long time, man, they just want to continue to do their thing, rock their boat. I had one guy say to me, why would I implement a new system now?
Yep.
I'm about 5 years from retirement. Why would I do that? Okay. And so I think that our job is to say, how do we bring up this new talent and be able to take advantage of the things that are native in their brains, native in their behavior, okay, and be able to couple it with what we have. We have conferences. I've been approached by young people in wealth management who said, will you give us a veneer? Because we don't get invited to some of these executive things because we don't have the right title. We don't have the right thing. Okay. But the 35-year-old wealth manager on the Goldman desk at a minimum of $45, $50 million, you should be listening to them because their clients are the ones that we need to be building innovation towards. But they're not getting the seat at the table because they're the younger ones.
Yep.
So I think we have to look at and let some of the egos that we have around us get embraced in this to say, know your customer. Okay. You know your customer from then, but where is your customer? And the one thing with WealthTech is that we sell to the wealth managers. We sell to this. We sell to the enterprise, the B2B to C, right? But who is really listening to the ultimate end customer and where is that being translated? And the new wealth customers are dealing with, in most cases, younger wealth managers because they're doing it, right? And you ask these guys, some of those brands that I just talked to, bigger brands, one of the wealth managers said, we don't have note takers. Like, there's no note taker here. Like, something as simple as that. And that's like a 2-year plan. So to answer it, I think it's our ability to connect the people, but be advised of looking deep into these organizations to find the rising stars and enable the rising stars of the future to be a prominent part of the new community. Because if you take those younger people, those organizations, and then you pair them with the young founders, I think you'll get more magic.
It's funny. I have a great example. So Secure Path, the startup that I was on, we had a board and we had a CEO of a Fortune 50 company. And he was the most creative, talk about taking risks and yet ran a huge company. And one of the things that surprised me after he retired, we would have, he was retired, but he was on all these boards. He went and got himself a 25-year-old mentor.
Huh.
And he did reverse
That's
mentoring. And I mean, this guy, anybody would kill themselves to get a half an hour with him. And he was telling me about it, and he was telling me why, and it was what you just said, which is he knows the world's changing, and he isn't a technology native. So he wants to really understand how they see the world, and he needs them to teach him. And he goes, I'm happy to help them. Because he's cognizant that he can. So I think it's just, he was a major leader because he thought differently, and that's just a good example. But I also have one other comment, which is I've always liked bringing new ventures together with existing big brands. because the big brands, the people inside, they want to do well too. They want to win. And they get so stuck in their so many meetings going on and trying to move the ball forward that I often remind them that when you talk to these new ventures, they're closest to the market and they're closest to some of your consumers or buyers because they have to be. They're, again, ultimately just playing this game of survival. And the only way for them to survive is to find product market fit and to find why it's relevant.
Yeah, but Will, you made a good point there. I want to pull out one thread from that, though, is that we have to be able to coach those executives. And I love that story. I've got 2 interns here and I've given them things and they're like, no, that's not good. I love it. You know what I mean? And I've got them working on ideas and learning from them every day. I love working with the kids. But we also have to make sure that the bigger companies are not bringing in the startups to learn from them. Right? That's why you got to get them to execution so fast, because they'll meet all of them and they'll spend their time. And that's where I was saying the alignment of innovation, of where that fits in an organizational structure of an organization, is very key, because the technology guys are not as prone to being that. And no matter what, listen, this whole, here's technology, here's data, here's this. Let's think about it. What isn't technology today? What isn't? Food. But there's an element of food. We buy it online. And so we go and say, we got a technology. Of course you have a technology solution. Okay. What would you be building if you didn't? Okay. So it's everywhere.
A great way to invert it.
I like that.
Right?
Yes.
And I say, the other thing I say to that is data's our oxygen. Okay. Yep. That's the reality. So as we look at who's going to get the most benefit from these products and how they go in, we have to be with abundance, not looking at it. But I think that there are so many ways that this can be better. And again, it's not all bad. When I talk to founders every day, and my heart goes out to them, of saying, this guy didn't call me back, this guy didn't call me back. And I say to people, let's just do one thing. Okay. I tell them, get a quick no is better than a long yes. Okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings, but I'll come back in 6 months. Okay. I don't have enough clients. I don't have enough revenue, whatever. Cool. But don't waste my time. And that's going back, Will, to the thread I was pulling that says they'll bring him back for another meeting. They're learning. And sometimes they're just learning the use case.
Yeah. And I think that's really unfair. And I've had that happen to me and I've seen it. I agree.
Let me ask you a question. Can I ask you guys a question?
Sure.
What do you think? What is your thoughts on our conference world of networking these days?
Go ahead, Lisa.
My gut reaction was not good. I feel like if there were a way, we just throw folks at a room, and I wish there were a more curated way of interacting, and not only knowing that you have the audience there that is a good fit, but also ways to have people get engaged, asking each other questions, having real conversations. I just, as opposed to just jumping in a room and have at it. That was my.
I had somebody say to me the other day about that, but and we talked about it a little bit just behind the car. So I've curated a dinner that worked really well, but and I'll give you an example of this too. So one of the startups that came to me a couple of years ago, it was in our first cohort, and she didn't have any revenue. She didn't have any of that, but she had some clients and very little revenue. She got some money from those clients. And she was trying to do the big strategic partnership stuff. Anyway, we did a showcase. And what I mean by that is she invited clients. I invited 6 people, like 12 people in the room, but 12 different companies. Okay. And the beauty of that 12 different companies in one room at one time is that if you're in one room with one group of people and it's your organization and your peers, you are less likely to think of the question that you want to ask on your mind because of the fear that one of your colleagues may think it's a dumb question or you're stepping over bounds, right? The whole political behavioral thing. But when you put 12 different companies in a room with a startup, it's fascinating what happens because what you do is you drive energy.
Mm.
And you're going to get that question, and you're going to get that question because no one's competing for the conversation. No one's fearing that someone's going to think they're not smart. And so you get more energy, you get more things. And in that resulted in 4 contracts out of that 12-person lunch.
A third. Okay? Amazing.
And so that's back to the curation. And I'm not speaking badly of that. I started an event that we were doing. I think you guys came and you loved it and it was great. And I'm not saying it wasn't great because our reviews on our kind of events were amazing.
It was,
but
good.
I don't think it's, I'm not going to do it this year. I'm going to focus on more curated events, and not because, and people say, why aren't you doing it? Because the value in it is great, but we don't need to just have exciting showcases. We need to be able to look at efficiencies of time, of how we curate people to get the outcome. And the outcome is getting people connected in business, whether that's business from referrals for you guys or the startup or the big companies. I'm just going to explore over the next 12 months better ways to do that make less of a time commitment.
Love it.
My comment on the conferences is really buttoned up with what you said. I think the world really needs to get at what's real, both success and failure, instead of the Facebook economy that everything's great, and make it real. And we've been at a bunch of conferences, some really large and some smaller. And oftentimes when they have the smaller breakout and there's a good speaker and it creates a conversation, it's so much more valuable. So I think it's about creating the conversation. And I love your perspective. We're going to, as we come into the last couple minutes, do you have any parting thoughts? This was just such a great conversation around enterprises, new ventures, bringing it together, what you've seen, the 7th sales cycle that we're in. How do you put a wrap on this, and what kind of advice do you have for the whole community, both new venture and enterprises, really just trying to make the industry better?
That's a big question. But I will tell you that one of the things that we have to look at, sales, building a startup, we talked a little bit earlier about the athletic nature of a founder and what we need to do. But what I think we all need to be able to do is recognize how fast things work and what the attention span of people are these days. And even people that have been around for a long time, have to adapt to the new ways of thinking, like the mentor. But I think what we have to look at is how do we speed up the process and not use excuses. And we have to change behavioral patterns. It's not about what the product is. It's not about that. But whether we're in banking, whether we're in wealth management, whether we're in retirement, right? I think we have to look through the behavioral patterns of people to build and to sell into organizations. But my ask to the companies out there, do not ghost your founder. Do not. If you have the opportunity and a founder cold calls you or wants to talk to you, trust me, you'll get 15 minutes of something you didn't know before you spoke to them. And if all you got was knowledge, then thank them for that knowledge and don't waste their time anymore. If you think there's a promising thing and you can't help them, then give them one referral. Give them one. And I think all this bullshit that we do, on LinkedIn, and I do it too, it's worthless, totally worthless. Like reel after reel after reel, really. It's great. It's there. It's not the human way. And I do believe whether it's retail, whether it's fintech, whether it's that, I believe that in my lifetime, still left what I got, that we are going to see a move back to more personal meetings. And I think when we get to the point of engaging on a personal level, that will accelerate the speed by which we do things. It's really easy to get on a Zoom for an hour. But if I'm going to sell you in Minnesota, I'm getting on a plane and coming to Minneapolis, and you're going to see me, and I'm going to see everybody else in Minneapolis. And we have to get in the room and we have to do real business with real behavior, real styles, and together accelerate this, because if not, we aren't going to accelerate anything with AI, because we're going to have so many widgets. We're not going to see the forest through the trees, and we're going to not know what works.
Right. And I love that as a way to tie this off. It really is about what's real and creating real relationships, because there is so much technology. I think people are yearning for what's authentic, what's real,
Yes.
and how can it really help the business. Pam, this is incredible. Thank you so much for your time, your words of wisdom. I think we have 7 more podcast time with you, and we'll have to think that through.
Yes, this is fantastic. Thank you, Pam.
I say to everyone, we started the point this way. Founders risk their family, risk their life. They do all of this, okay? So to the institutions, to the buyers, you're lucky, you've got your thing, but it takes an interesting character to do that. But they're taking the risk. You have to listen to them. Because also, if they're risking something that's not right, we owe it to the founders. I've told more than one founder, this isn't the idea, go start over. And that's okay feedback too, but don't ghost them. Don't block them. Take their messages. And to the founders, don't write stupid messages in LinkedIn that says, we have so many people in common. I want that person.
Right.
Stop that. Stop it. Right. And just figure out the way to communicate. Comment on their posts. Comment on their thought leadership. You can call someone today and get the most intimate detail and have a connection with them. Do your homework. Know something about the person you're calling and talking to, and that'll go a lot longer to get those first meetings.
Awesome.
Great advice. Again, thank you so much, Pam.
Thank you guys.
Love your energy, enthusiasm. This has been fantastic. And thank you, everyone, for listening in on another episode of Decoding Growth. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you all.
Decoding growth isn't just talk, it's insight, action, and shared wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, share your insights and join the conversation. Subscribe, rate, review, and spread the word. Thanks for listening. See you next time.